Your knowledge of contract language is imperative.
You must know what a violation looks like if you wish to be active in its cessation.
It is important to understand that being active and knowledgeable affects your overall bargaining strength.
Together, we can forge a more militant NALC.
Rise and shine, letter carriers. Good morning. Get ready to unwrap another package of insights on Parcels of Knowledge, your go-to podcast for everything you need to dominate your office. I'm your host, the Roseville Wrecking Ball, and we're diving in. With this heat blazing down, I can't stress enough how important it is for our Michigan letter carriers to stay safe. Well, in fact, all letter carriers. I just know about how the conditions are going to be for Michigan. Remember that NIOSH rest schedule I've been talking about in a prior episode? The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health recommendation for my area of Michigan is a critical 45 minutes of rest for every 15 minutes of work. I know it sounds ridiculous, but hey, it really is going to be that hot out today. I think the adjusted temperature looks like it's going to be 119 degrees. Don't risk it. Head over to the Parcels of Knowledge Facebook page to find the full chart and make sure you're staying safe. Remember, if you get in trouble for taking those conference stops, your steward can use this chart for persuasive value. I recommend every office posting it. Alright, now let's get into the fun stuff. I'd like to start off today's episode with a breakdown of how the national agreement observes the changes to the new OTDL lists. Starting July 1st, there'll be a new way to sign up for overtime. It is called the NS Day List. Essentially, there'll be a number of combinations of ways you can sign up for overtime, and I will break those down. My installation and branch has had an NS Day List for a long time. My installation since 2011, but my branch has had it since, I think, the 70s. But this national interpretation will be killing my remedies, unfortunately, and will be being done in a way that will not best serve either the Postal Service's best interest nor the letter carriers. If you guys haven't wrapped up LMOs yet, I would recommend you guys ask your management counterparts to allow the OWA to join the NS Day list as well. Over here, we found it works best when everyone has the choice to sign the NS Day list, so that there's a bigger pool of people who can be available to work their day off. It works out better for carriers because it gives them new ways to receive overtime. Allows you more of a flexibility with your schedule if you want overtime. And it helps management because it ensures that there'll be enough people here to deliver the mail on a day that needs help. Either way, I digress. Let's digest exactly what these lists will actually be as is explained in the National Agreement and without any local alterations. 14 days prior to the beginning of a quarter, letter carriers will have the option of signing an overtime desired list or lists by signing up in a fashion that management makes available. Usually, that is in the form of a sign-up sheet. All letter carriers, including those who are medically restricted, will have the following choices. 1. All full-time letter carriers will have the right to sign no list. This indication will be for letter carriers who desire not to work overtime in any capacity. This does not mean that they will not work overtime, but this does mean that management must exhaust the overtime desired lists prior to forcing those on no list to do overtime, except in the case of a no list overtime on their own assignment when the OTDL is already in a penalty status. If you do not wish for overtime, sign no list. Some offices may have a list that they may call the 8-hour list instead. Sign that list if that's your office. Number 1.5. All full-time regulars who choose that they would prefer to only work 8 hours per day on a regular scheduled day, which is normally indicated with not signing any list, may also place their name on the NS Day list as well. If they do, they will be indicating that they will be available to work up to 8 hours a day on a non-scheduled day. Number 2, all full-time regular letter carriers will have the option to sign up for the OWA, which is the Own Work Assignment list. This list is for letter carriers who wish to work up to 12 hours a day on their own assignment only. In the 1985 MOU that was signed to create the Own Work Assignment list, there is a prohibition that clearly indicates that the OWA cannot work on their NS days. This is best explained in the JCAM, page 8-21, where it reads in relevant part, signing up for the work assignment overtime does not create any entitlement or obligation to work overtime on a non-scheduled day. For purposes of overtime on a non-scheduled day or on other than their own assignment, carriers on the work assignment list are treated exactly the same as any other full-time carriers not on the ODL. They may be required to work overtime under the provisions of Article 8.5.d. So it is this prohibition that I believe Brian Renfro is leaning on in order to make this whole list thing a bit more confusing. I'm not sure why he didn't elect to modify this MOU jointly with management in order to ensure a more smooth transition. But it doesn't matter. We have what we have. In summation, if you sign the OWA list, you cannot sign the OTDL list, and you cannot sign the NS Day list. You'll be obligated to work the overtime assigned to you for your own route up to 12 hours a day, and you will not be able to come in on your NS Day without it being a holiday schedule and without the conditions of mandatory forced overtime being met. Number 3, all full-time regular letter carriers will have the option to sign the OTDL list. This list is not longer comprised of a 10-hour preference and a 12-hour preference. Brian Renfro did remove the MOU that created the preference system, but personally, it should have never been there. The OTDL was always required to work up to 12 hours anyway in conditions in which the non-OTDL would be mandated. So that preference system was misleading at best. If you sign this list, you may also sign the NS Day list. If you so choose to sign the NS Day list as well, you will have to be available for work up to 12 hours on every day of the year. Every single NS Day has the potential of being an opportunity for overtime. Any full-time regular letter carrier who so chooses to sign up for an overtime list at the beginning of each quarter will be able to leave such lists at any given time in that quarter, unless your LMOU says otherwise. Any overtime scheduled for that day, the day of the request, will still have to be satisfied. Stewards, keep in mind that if a carrier leaves a list, for example, if they leave the OTDL a week before the quarter is over because they are the highest carrier and they don't want to let people get paid for inequitability, the carrier may leave the list, but the time they have served does not. I learned that from the Region 6 MBA David Mudd when I had a carrier in my office who intended to do just that. The other carriers ended up still getting paid because the time that the carrier had worked was still distributed. You can't take that back, regardless of whether or not the carrier is on the list. For all those carriers who are concerned about equitability unfortunately works the same way it always has. There is no entitlement to overtime. Overtime cannot be accepted or denied. It is only assigned. The only exception is that it is to be equitably distributed within any given quarter. The NALC has an equitability process called equalization that has been developed over the years. It is a 2-quarter process. There are thresholds developed locally, usually based on past practice initially. I will use my office's threshold for example, but not every office is to be within the same amount of hours threshold. In my office, The OTDL must be within 8 hours of each other in order for it to be considered equitably distributed. If they are not, they will start the next quarter in a negative status. This is because arbitrators have given management an expectation to make right what they have mismanaged from the prior quarter. Since there is no entitlement to overtime, and since management has the right to mismanage under Article 3, they have used false pretense of ignorance to be able to buy themselves another quarter to correct the inequitability, or else be ordered to pay the carriers for the difference. At the end of the second quarter, if those same carriers who were behind last quarter are not within 8 hours of the top carrier, they are to be equalized through payment of what they were supposed to have worked, which is the difference. Keep in mind that nationally, there is an observation of both hours worked and opportunities offered. This practice is sometimes different depending on the office and the LMOU and the past practice. But nationally, for example, a letter carrier who was offered 4 hours but refused to work more than 1 hour of overtime will be understood to have had 4 hours charged for that day's opportunities. This brings us to our only difference from before. Starting July 1st, there will be an equitability calculated for all overtime offered over 8 hours in a day. This is an OTDL list equitability, and there will be an additional equitability for the NS Day list. Although equitability is largely based on past practice when it comes to determining a threshold, it is very easy to argue that this new NS Day list must be within 8 hours of each other in order to achieve an equitable distribution. This is because NS Days are only offered in 8-hour blocks. I would argue that overtime spent on an OTDL's first 8 hours of their NS Day would be considered towards the NS Day equitability, and the remaining 4 hours that would potentially be worked would be considered towards OTDL equitability. This does not include holiday schedules. Anything from 1 to 8 hours on an NS Day, you are on the NS Day list. Equitability is unfair because to fix management choosing only their favorites to work, you would need to wait 2 quarters and lose time for the thresholds. For example, in 2 quarters, my within 8 hours threshold would lose any given OTL 16 hours. My installation's LMOU had squashed this unfair equitability notion dead in its tracks for the NS Day in particular. I would suggest if anyone can get it into their LMOUs, they should. My installation since 2011 would distribute the NS Day opportunities by color and by seniority in a rotating fashion, with each rotation starting at the beginning of the quarter. This entitlement would guarantee an equitable distribution, because if you rotate by seniority, everyone gets a chance before you offer the next guy a second chance. Additionally, my old remedy, because of the entitlement, would grant a carrier who was skipped automatic payment. It would be a daily violation rather than a 2-quarter process. Unfortunately, our national has monumentally failed the little guys like us who already had a good deal, especially because it seems like our national is obsessed with getting our LMOU practices out and getting it consistent with the national agreement. And so is management. They're both doing the same thing right now for some reason. Personally, I think both the union and the Postal Service is doing themselves a disservice by not altering the OWA MOU that prohibits them from working on their NS days. Over the years, the vast majority of our NS Day lists at Roseville have been made of OWA carriers. With this new implementation, people will be forced to choose between whether they want overtime on their NS Day or every day on their own route, but no NS Day overtime. This will grant management a smaller pool of people to call upon in times of need, and they will in turn lead to mandatory forcing of 8-hour desired carriers, and ultimately could lead to some mail going undelivered on any given day. If this happens to you, I do have a document you can use for persuasive value, and it comes from the least likely person you would suspect. This is especially for the stewards, but any carrier is welcome to listen in. I'd like to get an undelivered mail dilemma taken care of. This here is a treat for you militant stewards out there, and it will be shared on my Parcels of Knowledge Facebook today. Usually the OIG, the inspectors, they make excuses for management's failures. Normally they protect their own and they always have each other's backs. I have found an OIG report that sounds like it could have been written by me. It looks like it was written by the union. They must have had a problem with this management team or something. This is an audit report from January of 2024, and I would suggest you use it for its persuasive value anytime management's failure to schedule right results in undelivered mail. A lot of times they like to blame the carriers for calling in, but ultimately it is management's job to anticipate call-ins and to anticipate scheduling issues and needs. Show this to your management counterparts if you would like to ask them to allow the OWA to work NS days too, because it could result in less undelivered mail. This also results in happier customers. This document talks about a station who blamed their carrier's call-ins for undelivered mail that was found by the OIG in their inspection. It reads, in relevant part, what should have happened? Management should have provided the unit enough resources to deliver all mail each day. Postal Service policy states that managers must plan for unscheduled absences and situations that may interfere with normal delivery service. Management must also develop contingency plans for situations that may interfere with normal delivery service. In addition, Postal Service policy states that all types of first-class mail, priority mail, and priority mail express are always committed for delivery the day of receipt. Furthermore, managers are required to report all mail in the delivery unit after the carriers have left for their street duties as either delayed or curtailed in the DCV. End quote. Allowing the OWA carriers to work on their NS day if they so choose would be an appropriate contingency plan for situations that may interfere with normal delivery service. Propose this to management for your LMOU negotiations. I know this is too late, but try it if you got time, and make record of it. If they say no, that's fine, because we will not be able to win anything that directly conflicts with the national agreement in interest arbitration. My MBA office made it very clear. Everybody's MBA office makes it very clear because it's contractual. It just can't. It's not supposed to conflict, but if it does, it can happen, but it can't go to arbitration. But that's all right. If their bad decision creates undelivered mail in the future, I would file a grievance stating that it is management's fault. The idea was given to them during LMOU negotiations. Use this OIG report for persuasive value, showing that it is management's job to entertain contingency plans and that their ignorance has created undelivered mail. The union did everything it could. It had a fiduciary duty that it fulfilled. It suggested its own contingency plan, and management refused to accept it. Always require that management report any curtailed mail in the DCV. Lastly, with this new list being implemented on July 1st, I want you to remember that something hasn't changed, and that's our expectation to management that we are not on-call employees. There are M documents to support a full-time regular not being on call, which I will share on the Parcels of Knowledge Facebook. We have schedules for a reason. One thing I would like to make clear with management is that if they want to play hardball in terms of who they allow to come in, whether they pick their favorites or they don't want to allow OWA people to come in, try to let them know that NSA schedules should be in advance and that carriers are not obligated to come in if they called them to come in last minute. This will take the carriers to stand strong on this issue as well. But something that management has done here in my district with us who have already had NSA lists is they have made a habit of calling people hours after their start times. This is ridiculous. And now that there's a new start to my old practice, the one good thing is I'm going to be happy to start it on the right foot. And I would suggest you guys do too. They were getting to the point that each morning, if they needed somebody, they would have to call to get an approval by the POOM first that morning before they can call the carrier. No carrier deserves a sporadic schedule. Our schedules are fixed. Show us the respect we deserve and schedule your need for overtime. And if they don't schedule it, carriers, you got to show them who's boss. That's all for the contractual things today, but thanks for sticking with me through today's a little bit longer than usual episode. I had a lot to cover. I wanted to make sure you got all the info you needed. Our branch picnic yesterday was a blast. So much fun. Shout out to Corey Walton and James Henry. Heard you guys were at the nearby branch picnic the same day for 2184. Sorry I missed seeing you, but you know what? I always got to put my guys first. Another reminder about those burning questions for Region 15 candidate Richie Ray. You want to grill Region 15 candidate Richie Ray? What do you want to ask him about his plans as NBA? Email them to rosevillewreckingball@yahoo.com or send a private message to the Parcels of Knowledge Facebook page. We're accumulating questions for an interview, and we're going to ask every single question. And Richie Ray's going to answer them, even hard ones. Throw some hard balls out there. In addition, throw some hard balls at me for me running for Branch 4374 Vice President. If you have any questions for my campaign or for me becoming the next Vice President of 4374, please send them to Richie Ray. You'll find him on Facebook, Richie Ray, and he's also got a podcast called The Hot House, where he's posted the same thing, but he's got his email in there. If you have to, send them to me, I guess. But I'd rather you send them to Richie Ray. But if you don't want to go looking, at the very least, send them to me. Mark your calendars, too. July 15th is the deadline for all submissions for both interviews. After July 15th, we'll be interviewing each other. Hopefully, he said early August. I think we can do late July, but we'll have a talk. Hopefully we can get that done really fast, like me and Walt did. Hope today's insights hit the mark, and I hope they arm you for whatever comes your way July 1st and in the future. As always, stay strong out there, letter carriers, and today, make sure you're safe in that heat.